Good evening to everyone. Today we are going to have one interesting dermatology webinar. For this, on behalf of Indian Association for Veterinary Dermatology and Intas Animal Health, I welcome all of you to join with us for this wonderful dermatology webinar. Actually, we are having a lot of autoimmune diseases which are very challenging in our practice. Say either a human or a dog. It is quite challenging, and it is very important to identify earlier and to identify what all the things has to be done in the field level, and how can we can convince our client or prepare our client to have the uh, follow up, or how to maintain the case. All those things we can discuss in detail in this webinar. For this, I welcome our Dr. Yamini, Hamsa Yamini, who is assistant professor working in Kanuvas, that is Salem Veterinary Research Institute. She is having a very good interest in medicine. Actually, I know her from her student days, and I observed her keen interest in doing things, and she is involving herself to do the maximum, and she is very good in learning things, and how to approach, or how to deliver it. All those things she is very good. So I thought she is the right person to do this. So welcome her for this show. And also I welcome Dr. Nitin Bhatia and Dr. Amanjot Singh for this show. And I request Dr. Nitin Bhatia to introduce her about the speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nagraj sir. Dr. Hamsa is quite well known to me. I have seen her in the college, winning number of awards. So I would be privileged to introduce her. She did her graduation from Madras Veterinary College. Was selected after graduation. She was selected for a rotational internship at Virginia Maryland College of Veterinary Medicine, US. You're aware that US is having a tie-up with Tanva, so she was selected there. She was a part of the 6 weeks clinical rotational internship program. She is driven by passion towards internal medicine. So she chose to be a postgraduate in internal medicine, especially. Did her research in field emergency critical care in small animals, followed by a postgraduate diploma in small animal emergency critical care, and then pursued her PhD from Chennai in cardiology. She has also served as a fellow of diagnostic imaging. She has been a prestigious INTAS and ISBM Young Scientist Award winner for outstanding research in ISBM. Currently, she is employed at Salem, the new college of VCRI Salem, as an assistant professor in the field of clinical medicine. I have the privilege of welcoming Dr. Hamsa Yamini for this webinar. Let us, the stage is all yours, ma'am. Yeah, please go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Nagarajan and Bhatia, for giving me the introduction. It's nice to hear from both of you. So shall I go ahead with the presentation?
Yeah, ma'am.
Yes. Today we are going to see a topic on diagnosis and management of pemphigus in canine practice. This is Wonder, a 2-year-old Lhasa Apso. Yes, sir. So this is Wonder, a 2-year-old Lhasa Apso male dog, which was present with this kind of lesions, like excoriating crusty lesions over the nasal planum and here over the leg. So first, as a clinician, as a practitioner, first we did a diagnostic workup. So as a dermatology, when we are approaching any dermatology case, first we take a skin scraping. So first, when I took a skin scraping, the first thing which I always think is it has to be mite. It has to be positive for mite. But unfortunately, it didn't have mites. So it was negative for mites. The next, which possible diagnostic thing which I can do in a clinic is take a tape impression. I checked for tape impression. I couldn't find any malassezia also. So what we did was we initially started with some fewer antibiotics and we took a culture. Then we thought, okay, we asked the client to come after a few days to come after the results come back. After that, we did a culture. We still couldn't find the result came was surprising. There's no growth were detected. Then we were clearly clueless and the animal was not responding to treatment. It was still getting worsened. It had severe pruritus and the lesion was going on spreading in the trunk and all over the body. So then we were wondering what disease this is. So we thought maybe food allergy. We don't think it was looking like more like a food allergy because the pattern was different. And then we thought about, we did in hematology and biochemistry to find any systemic diseases involved. Everything were within normal limits. Any tumor, we were thinking the animal was young and there were no any hematology or biochemical changes. So the next what we thought was hormonal. So we did a thyroid profile, but then it's still within the normal limits. Then everything we started thinking, what is the most possible cause of this kind of skin lesions? And this is not the first case. We are seeing few cases like this. We couldn't find the reason why is there such kind of a skin lesion. So then this concept of something, when I started reading and working it out, then this type of autoimmune skin diseases, the concept of autoimmune skin diseases is now prevailing among our practice. The reason for me choosing this topic is because when I started my practice earlier, I couldn't see such diseases. But now as we see a lot of cases presenting with such diseases, these are autoimmune skin diseases. And I'm very sure that all the practitioners would have come through this autoimmune skin disease and we would have treated it without knowing it's an autoimmune skin disease. So I thought I will throw a little bit of light on my autoimmune skin disease so that we will have a better understanding and a prognostic and a better treatment protocol for dogs which are present with autoimmune skin diseases. And as the world is going to the One Health concept, this autoimmune skin disease, the pemphigus, is very common to the human complex. So I thought we work on it. Basically, what is pemphigus? Pemphigus is a very rare mucocutaneous autoimmune bullous disease. What happens is there's a flaccid blisters and erosions of the mucous membrane on the skin happens. Why is the name pemphigus? Is actually because pemphigus is a Greek name which says because of it causes blisters. Pemphigus means blisters. So this is a disease which causes blisters and erosions all over the skin. There are actually basically 4 types of pemphigus. I know when we read about this pemphigus, there are different names. Yes, they're all Greek names, but it's very simple. The treatment approach is the same, but just to have a different, the way the pathogenesis and where the lesions are there, they have divided pemphigus as following. Pemphigus foliaceus can be divided as pemphigus foliaceus and pemphigus erythematous. Pan-epidermal pustular pemphigus, which is also called pemphigus vegetans. Then we have pemphigus vulgaris and paraneoplastic pemphigus. Today in our presentation, we'll be more looking at pemphigus foliaceus. I'll be a little bit on erythematous and vulgaris. The reason why is the most common and wide presentation of pemphigus is pemphigus foliaceus in dogs. To understand why is pemphigus so important, what does it cause, we have to know something which is called a desmosome. What is a desmosome? Desmosomes are small structures. This is basically the skin, and we know the skin is made up of different layer of keratinocytes. So what happened? These are small desmosomes. These are desmosomes are structures which help to place, the desmosomes stick each other. These are like the glues which help to stick the keratinoids with each other. What happened is pemphigus. There are autoimmune bodies, that is immune bodies from the own system are produced against the small structures called desmosome. Thereby, these are causing fragments of this keratinocytes. This structure is known as acantholysis. The reason these acantholysis is the main reason for the blisters and erosions to form in the skin. So pemphigus is basically an acantholytic, causes acantholysis of keratinocytes. So when we see something called acantholytic cells on a cytoplasm or in any biopsy report, when you see something called acantholytic cells, please consider pemphigus as a very, very important disease. So most probably only a pemphigus in canine autoimmune diseases causes acantholysis. So basically there are 3 types of receptors, which is called TSG1 and TSG3. That is, these are desmolysis. It's called desmoglin 1, desmoglin 3. Desmoglin 1 is seen, these receptors are found on the desmosomes, especially in the top skin layer, that is towards the stratum corneum and the stratum granulosum, and gradually they go lesser in number. But when you come this desmoglin 3, they are higher in the basement membrane and they gradually decrease in number as they go to the stratum corneum. So very simple, that pemphigus foliaceus, the target protein, that is the protein is desmoglin 1. So it acts towards the desmosomes of the keratinocytes of the corneal layer, that is called superficial keratinolysis. So especially the clinical relevance is that it causes superficial lesion, ear muscle are mostly common affected. While pemphigus vulgaris, which affects mostly the desmoglin 3, this is present morely in the mucous membrane and the lower basement membrane. So what happened? The lower basement membrane. So what happened is that these are target cells are more here. So this causes more lesions in the basement membrane. So more mucosal damage, like oral cavity, anus, esophagus are more affected because it's more in the mucous layer. This pan-epidermal pustula pemphigus has the target protein as desmoglin 1. It's same as pemphigus foliaceus and its lesions are throughout the epidermis. This para-neoplastic pemphigus, they have plaquins. Basically, these are desmosomes are present intracellular, and this is the cause reacting between the tumor cells as well as the anti-plaquin antibodies. So basically, when we see this is the corneal, the granular, the spinous layer, and the basal layer, here we can say they are all lined up with keratinocytes. So when the desmosomes, here we can, there are desmo, these are all desmo, they all be desmosomes all around the keratinocytes. So when the antibodies act against the desmosomes, here in this corneal layer, then it's termed as pemphigus foliaceus. Here towards the basement membrane, if they are affected, then it is called pemphigus vulgaris. So that's the reason in foliaceus you have a superficial epidermal lesions, while pemphigus vulgaris you have the lower epidermis region. Pemphigus foliaceus. As we all know, the production is used for the production of antibodies against the desmosomes present in the surrounding the keratinocytes, and they causes detachment leading to acantholysis. This is the most common autoimmune skin diseases found in dogs. Any age, sex, or breed is being predisposed to this condition. They say as a genetic predisposer, Akitas and Chow Chows are more prone for it. In mostly it's idiopathic. I'm very sure many of them would have come across this, but we don't know it's called pemphigus foliaceus. Sometimes it's drug induced. When I did my research, I did found a drug induced pemphigus in my research during my research. And maybe a dog with a chronic skin inflammation may suddenly you find this kind of lesions which lead to pemphigus foliaceus. Primary lesions, what kind of lesions can be found? We can find superficial pustules. While secondary lesions, we can have superficial erosions, thrust, scales, epidermal colloids, and alopecia. The very classical, see, but the next question people may, we all may ask, even I started asking, these are common in any skin diseases. What does make a difference between pemphigus? Here, all the autoimmune skin diseases, most of the skin diseases, especially pemphigus, the lesions are mostly towards the nasal planum, ear pinna, and foot pads. First, the lesion will start between the nasal planum, the ear pinna, and the foot pads, especially bridge of the nose, around the eyes, and the ear pinna before it becomes generalized. This is classical of pemphigus. Nasal depigmentation is also very common. We can say, they usually say the loss of nasal cobblestone. That is, any dog, the nasal, the mouth will have a nasal cobblestone structure, which will be lost in case of pemphigus. And they have foot pad hypokeratosis. Generalized skin diseases, if the animal becomes really sick and goes to generalized skin disease, they have concurrent lymphadenopathy, limb edema, anorexia, and depression may be present. This is quite rare in case of pemphigus foliaceus, but for pemphigus vulgaris, it's quite common. As I told you, it may be spontaneous in case of Akita, Chow Chow, and Dachshunds. And Akita and Chow Chow, I think, are now creating, are being under popularity nowadays. So we're getting a little more Akitas and Chow Chow. So we have to remember pemphigus foliaceus is common in cases of Akitas and Chow Chow. And as usual, Dachshunds are very common for this autoimmune skin diseases. Drug related is very common in Labrador and Dobermans. And any chronic inflammation, any dog, it's not restricted only to these kinds of breeds, but any dog with a history of long skin disease are prone for pemphigus foliaceus. This is the pattern of pemphigus foliaceus. Very common, nasal planar, around the eyes, and ear pinna, and the foot pad. This is very, very common. The rest, maybe we can find it in the trunk, under the belly, on the flank, on the flank, and basically you can find everywhere, but very, very common we have to understand is the nasal planar lesion. In this, I'll show you some pictures of pemphigus foliaceus in dogs. Here we can have a diffuse pattern of these lesions. We can find this crust crust and epidermal colloids all over the body of the dog. Here, especially in the nasal planar and around the eyes and the face. Here, we can have alopecia, crusting, papillodermatitis on the face and the lesion on the nasal planar and the ear pinna. The absence of ear follicles in the nasal planar is very, very unique feature of pemphigus. Here, we can have a crusting, erosive dermatitis of the nasal planar with the depigmentation and the loss of the cobblestone. The cobblestone will have small serration, which is normal for a dog. Here we can really find out there is a loss of that cobblestone structure is very classical and unique for pemphigus. We can find a crusting papular dermatitis on the ear pinna, and you have alopecia crusting dermatitis in the ear margin. These are the different presentations of pemphigus foliaceus. Alopecia crusting papular dermatitis, this entire cutaneous surface, you can find these kind of lesions, and we can find alopecia with a crusting papular rash on the trunk also. Here we can find hypokeratosis and crusting of the foot pads. This is the actual pad, while we can find hypokeratosis and crusting of foot pads. Here, very common is that the interdigital space will be normal, especially in case of pododermatitis and those kind of pneumonicosis. You'll have mostly lesion in the interdigital space. But here, only to the foot pad, this is restricted. The interdigital space is not affected in cases of pemphigus foliaceus, and this is very classical. We can find hypokeratosis and crusting of the scrotum, depigmentation of the nasal planum with the loss of the normal cobblestone appearance of the nose. We can have severe moist dermatitis, these kind of lesions, and we can find severe crusting in the foot pads. We can see that the interdigital space is normal, but only the foot pads and the nail bed is affected here. The same picture, we have severe crusting and even the nail bed is affected. Here we have periocular and erosive dermatosis is there. And here same thing, crusting alopecia around the eye and crusting of the foot pads. Closer foot pad, you have demonstrating thickened keratin, especially in the margin you can find, and you can find a closer picture where you have depigmentation in the nasal planar, erosion and crusting is there, and loss of the loss of the cobblestone structure of the nose. You can have severe crusting of the ear pinna here, and severe alopecia crusting dermatitis is also seen. We can have erosive dermatitis, crusting dermatitis, while we can see punctate ulcers. I am very sure I have seen this kind of ears, but I have thought it was pneumonicosis and I have treated for pneumonicosis, but later we found out on scraping it was negative. So please, I have seen many dogs with these kind of structures, which we have missed in our practice. We have same crusting dermatitis and the loss of normal cobblestone and depigmentation of the nose. Very classical. This is a very classical picture of pemphigus. We have alopecia crusting dermatitis, the same dog with a very closer picture, and you can find this pustules, the primary lesions. And you have pustular dermatitis, and you can find they all find together. This is a drug-induced dermatitis, especially in pemphigus. Here we can find the crusting lesions in the ear margin, and you can find generalized crusting papular dermatitis on the ventrum of the dog. Same thing, crusting hypokeratosis of the foot pad with a normal interdigital is a very classical symptom. We can find the crusting hypokeratotic foot pad, but the interdigital space is normal, which is very, very classical for pemphigus. The severe crusting and erosive dermatitis of the trunk of an animal. Same, severe widespread erosive lesion. This is, you can find severe widespread erosive lesion. This is after shaving, literally after shaving, the animal had pemphigus. So you can find the kind of erosive lesions of the skin, how erosive it is. So now I find a dog with these kind of lesions. I suspect to have pemphigus. So how to go about the diagnostic techniques? So first you do a cutaneous cytology, which is very, very common and very simple. We can all do it in our practice. All we need is a slide and a staining solution. Just scrape out, take out all the crust, press the lesions against the skin. You find a smear and stain it, and you see it under microscope. You can see it under oil emulsion microscope. If you are not comfortable, it's not getting confirmative stage, then you can go with a punch biopsy. You do a ring block around the site which you want to take, especially around the lesion. Take a punch and send it for biopsy to a pathologist. who can read well a histopathology, a dermatohistopathology, which is very, very classical. And please let them know what you want to see. So what you want to see, I'll be showing. So please let them know that you are looking for such kind of cells. So what are the top differential diagnosis like pneumonicosis, superficial pyoderma, dermatophysis, subcorneal pustule dermatosis, eosinophilic pustulosis, drug eruptions like wheals or zinc responsive? These are the top differentials. So basically the lesions of pneumonicosis is this kind of a lesion, while superficial pyoderma, you have this kind of lesion. You don't anywhere involve the nasal planar. So when you see the nasal planar around the eyes and ear pinna, please think pemphigus in your differentials. So how do you go about the diagnosis? You rule out the differentials. Cytology, you may find neutrophils and acantholytic cells. Very, very classical for pemphigus. You have to look at cells called acantholytic cells. Eosinophils may be present. ANA is usually rule out systemic lupus erythematosus. So if you can perform ANA in a lab, it's well and very good, but usually in pemphigus it comes out to be negative. If you do a dermatopathology, histopathology, you look at a subcorneal pustules with acantholytic cells. I'll be showing pictures over that. You have immunofluorescence or immunobiochemistry. You can look at skin biopsies. You can, if you are possible, you can do immunofluorescence. They say the rat skin appearance will get you the picture of pemphigus. Basically, you can do a bacterial culture. Usually, it is sterile, but occasionally, if secondary bacterial infection has happened, you might get isolates from your culture. So, as I told you, this is pemphigus foliaceus. So, you will find subcorneal. So, corneal layer is there. Subcorneally, you may find acantholytic cells. But how acantholytic cells look? Yes, these are acantholytic cells. What happened is that the keratins are just left in floating. So what happened? These are round. Usually keratins are found to be in layers. So because of these acantholysis, they are formed in solitary round structure with large nuclei. These are acantholytic cells. We found on a simple cytology. Yes, this is a case of pemphigus foliaceus. You can find acantholytic cells with numerous neutrophils. These are acantholytic cells and these are neutrophils, which I am sure that we can all appreciate in our practice when we start seeing cytology of dogs which you suspect for pemphigus. And this is a very closer picture of an acantholytic cell. We can have it's a keratinocyte, it's round and solitary. So this is round and then with the central nucleus, we can find these are separately found in a cytology. Similarly, these are neutrophils with acantholytic cells, numerous acantholytic cells. And this is the histopathology picture. The keratinocytes are supposed to be in layers. These are all keratinocytes. So what happens in pemphigus is these keratinocytes are left floating and singular. So these are called acantholytic cells. And what happens is that these form a severe cleft-like picture on pathology. So this cleft is a very important feature of pemphigus, while you find these acantholytic cells. How to go about treatment? Treatment, I'll be talking separately to go about what are the drugs can be treated and how much of dosage can be given. So treatment basically for prevent the secondary pyoderma, you start with the long-acting systemic antibiotics for minimum for 4 weeks. They claim that if you start earlier antibiotics on the induction phase, they have higher survival rates than dogs treated with only suppressive drugs alone. You have to treat antibiotics till the concurrent immunotherapy as the pemphigus is under control. How do you go about treatment? First, you do a topical therapy, you do a conservative systemic treatments, you do a steroid therapy, or you can do a non-steroidal immunosuppressive therapy. Topical therapy, we can use tacrolimus. I think it's available with Intas, so we can use it every 12 hours or any steroid-containing product. Why you use a tacrolimus or a steroid is so that you reduce the dose of the oral systemic steroids, so that you reduce the side effects of the steroids. And if remission occurs, your frequency of application should be minimized to reduce the local adverse effects. Conservative systemic therapies like drugs can induce inflammation with no adverse effects can be given. I'll be treating about what are the conservative systemic treatments. Steroid therapy is the most reliable, predictable as it's an autoimmune disorder. NSAID, only steroids can be given, or you can add NSAID also if you do not get your appropriate results. That is, they don't respond to steroids. You can give oral prednisolone or methylprednisolone should be administered daily. After the lesions resolve, after 2 to 8 weeks, the dosage can be gradually tapered over a period of 8 to 10 weeks. So you have to instruct the owner. You have to make the owner available that this is not a very easy disease to be treated. So that's the reason they get frustrated. So you have to make the clients aware. Yes, I will take around 6 to 8 weeks for my cure. So you have to follow the treatment which we give. This is very, very important. Making an awareness towards the owner is very, very important. So when you see no improvements within 4 to 4 weeks, you can add any alternative immunosuppressive therapy like triamcinolone or dexamethasone, or you can add other non-steroidal immunosuppressive drugs. Why we go ahead with non-steroidal immunosuppressive drug? Because they are the side effects of steroids like iatrogenic Cushing's. A dog with concurrent, renal failure or steroids cannot be used on a higher level, or already animal under Cushing, so cannot be given over steroids. You can use in case of you can use this NSAID drugs like cyclosporin, oclanditib, and apoquil, which should be available, or you can import it. Azothioprine is very well available. A chlorambucil, cyclophosphamide, mycophenolate moflate, or leflunomide. The prognosis is fair to good, although some animals remain in remission after immune therapy. They have remission if it's tapered or discontinued. So these dogs, in case of pemphigus foliaceus, sometimes they tend to have a long time therapy, lifelong therapy. That time maybe you can think of any steroid alternative. Since they are on steroids, you have to monitor for iatrogenic Cushing signs, and you have to monitor the hemoglobin, biochemistry, and you have to adjust the steroids accordingly. As we all know, we are all giving steroids, so we have a very possible chance of getting dermatophytosis or pneumonicosis in the future because of the immune suppression caused by the disease. So we have to be aware that they can also flare up in between, and we need to treat them appropriately. The pemphigus erythematous, this is a very benign form. It forms sometimes it was earlier to be confused between lupus. The reason is because of the histopathological nature. The lesion is, mostly German shepherds, coolies, Shetland sheepdogs are mostly affected. They are limited to the face and the nasal bridge. Superficial erosion, scales, and crust are very typical. Dogs are only mildly pruritic. Nasal depigmentation is very common. Here, the mucocutaneous junction or the oral cavity is not involved. We can find the depigmentation in the nasal planar region, and it mostly be drug-induced also. And it's a better picture to show a depigmentation on the erosive picture. This is a still more closer picture of the loss of the cobblestone nature and the nasal depigmentation. Here, Sir, is my share slide? Slide is shared?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, all is well.
So shall I go? Is it visible now, sir?
Yeah, everything is.
Go ahead.
Yes, sir. So there's a crusting lesions are found in the nasal planar region and loss of the nasal cobblestone. Here, this is a very classical coolie, which is having a nasal depigmentation, nasal planar depigmentation, and a closer picture where there's a loss of the cobblestone nature of the nose, and we can find erosion nature. So this is pemphigus erythematous, mostly restricted towards the nose and the nasal planar. Top referentiases are nasal demodicosis, nasal pyoderma, dermatophytosis. I told you, discoid lupus erythematous is very closely related because of the histopathological nature. They are closely related to discoid lupus erythematous. They say nasal solar dermatitis. So that's the reason in these cases, we have to treat these dogs with the topical sunscreen, which I read, which I have not done yet, but maybe in the future we'll use it. On cytology, we can find neutrophils and acantholytic cells. And very common, they say this lichenoid interface dermatitis is very common in case of systemic lupus erythematous, which closely goes related. And same immunohistochemistry may be positive for this pemphigus. And culture may be usually sterile, but occasionally if we can secondary bacterial infection if secondary infection is present. As I told you, erythematous is also found in the subcorneal layer only, but they say they call interface dermatitis. So lichenification, they say thickening of the layers will be formed on histopathology. Sorry, I couldn't find a picture, but that's what I read in the literature. Treatment, they say this nasal solar dermatitis is closely related. Please avoid the animal to exposure to nasal. So they say you can use dog specific sunscreen lotions. And maybe titanium dioxide, they say it's usually ineffective. And symptomatic therapy to remove the crust can be used. And as usual, you start the antibiotic therapy, long systemic antibiotic therapy with the immunosuppressive therapy, so they have a better survival rates. Topical therapy, it's applied every 12 hours. Usually tacrolimus is more preferred. The reason is to reverse the systemic weakness. And then steroid therapy, which it's very standalone therapy, which I'll be discussing in later. Next goes the pemphigus vulgaris. What happens in pemphigus vulgaris? There's production of antibodies against the antigen in the dermal junction. So when there is an epidermal and dermal junction, the antibodies are produced. So basically what happens is that there is a severe mucosal damage and there is severe erosion and animal is having systemic reaction. The reason is difference foliation where vulgaris is that vulgaris will have systemic infection, animal will be really dehydrated, very dull, and systemic signs will be noticed. Erosion and ulcers and really vesicles and bulla occur on the skin, especially the mucocutaneous junction, lips, nares, eyelids you can found. And even in the mucous membrane like oral cavity, anus, vulva, prepuce, conjunctiva, also we can find these erosive lesions. Since the mucosa is involved, you have concurrent fever, depression, and arrhythmia is very, very common. Because the mucocutaneous junction is really inflamed, you have severe salivation and halitosis. The dog will be having only halitosis and salivation. When we look at it, we can find severe erosive ulcers in the mucocutaneous junction. And as usual, the lesion on the nasal plana, ear pinna, and foot pads are very unique, but they will be really ulcerative. We can find how ulcerative swelling and depigmentation and erosions. Here we can find severe alopecia, crustic, erosive dermatosis on the nasal planar, face, and then in the ear pinna as well as in the foot pads. Here we can find erosive lesions in the mucocutaneous junction, especially the lip, the conjunctiva, the gingiva, and here we can find erosive lesions in the tongue, in the palate, in the erosive dermatitis of the ear, and as here we can find severe erosive lesions in the ear pinna. Same here also we can find erosive lesions. Erosive and ulcerative lesions, they become very painful and becomes the biggest distress. Here we can find how erosive the dermatitis is seen. Here small dermatitis coalesce and formed a large erosive plaques under the belly. This is so erosive, severe sloughing, and there's severe discharge also. Here we can find lesions in the lip as well as in the gingiva also. On the tongue and as well as these erosive lesions on the lips. You find how bad it's around the anus. You can find in the oral lesion. You can find here. You can find the erosive lesions in the foot pad. Here erosive coalesce to form a big erosive lesion under the belly, and you can find how erosive and ulcerative the lesions is around the ears, the nasal planar, and around the face. Animal looks really painful. It's very, very painful and becomes discomfort for a dog. Usually, dog preferential is bullous pemphigoid, erythematous multifile, toxic epidermal necrolysis. These are other kind of immune-mediated disorders, and like epithelial lymphoma, which also has to be under the differential diagnosis. Severe drug reaction also may have this kind of lesion. So how do you differentiate? Here, maybe you can take cytology, or mere we see in these conditions, we advise you to take a biopsy because the acantholytic cells are going to be deep inside the layer. So especially they are going to be present in the hair. So for a cytology to identify acantholytic cells, you might use it. So these conditions, we advise you to take a bunch biopsy to find out here between the basal layer and this on the basement membrane or the epidermal and the interface between the dermal and the epidermal layer. Here you can find these acantholytic cells. Basically, that's what they happen and they lead to acantholysis. Here we can find how large the clefts, such kinds of clefts like the holes have been found in the skin itself. So it becomes very painful for a dog. And here carotenoids are lined up so next to next. But here can you see these are cleft and these are cells so solitary in nature. These are acantholytic cells. These are actually the clefts are found inside the skin. This is the skin structure. These are clefts. So these clefts are caused by acantholysis and these tend to be more painful for them. And I told you this is auto-antibody immunofluorescence technique. if we can do it, it's a further diagnostic technique. In the future, we may start doing it. So in that, if you do a fishnet appearance, this is a canal mucosal substrate where you can have this fishnet appearance, which suggests that the dog is having pemphigus vulgaris, or any pemphigus lesions may have this kind of immunofluorescent picture. Treatment, we need severe aggressive therapy is typically required. The use of non-steroidal immunosuppressive drugs alone or in combination steroids is recommended for the long-term maintenance. Next, we have the paraneoplastic pemphigus. The reason, it's a very small reason, is that when there is a lesion somewhere in the body, that is, when there is a tumor somewhere in the body, those tumor cells produce antibodies against the desmosomes, that is, against the keratinase desmosomes, leading to acantholysis. So this is one dog of a picture which is having paraneoplastic. Case of lymphoma, this had happened. So the animal is having lymphoma, but there is no cutaneous lymphoma, but this secretes antibodies against these desmosomes, leading to acantholysis. This is called paraneoplastic pemphigus. The treatment is you have to treat the tumor or remove the tumor as such from the body and treat with steroids to bring down the antibodies. So how to go over the treatment? Treatment is actually initially in 4 phases. So the topical therapy, we can use steroids like topical hydrocortisone, dexamethasone, triamcinolone, fluticasone, mometasone also. It's applied every 12 hours. Why we say is if you maintain it, you decrease the frequency. When you want to maintain, when there is a remission of the entire skin lesion, you taper to the lowest effective dose. Tacrolimus can be used, which is applied every 12 hours. And how do you maintain the dose? You taper to the lowest effective dose. Next, conservative oral adverse effects like essential fatty acids. 180 milligram of icosapentaenoic acid, that is omega-3 fatty acids per 10 pound per ounce daily can be given. Vitamin E can be added, which has as antioxidants, which can be given at 400 IU per ounce daily. You can give doxycycline, minocycline. Doxycycline acts as an immunomodulation therapy, like 5 to 10 hours every 12 hours. Then taper to the lowest effective dose. Cyclosporin can be added. It's an immune suppressive, but has lesser side effects and compared to steroids. We can give at 5 to 12.5. Maybe you can start as a higher dose, and then after remission is achieved, you have to slowly taper to the lowest effective dose. Reliably the most effective treatment, but adverse effects are common. The most commonly used is prednisolone. You can use 1 to 3 mg per kg per hour, 12 to 24 hours. Maintenance dose is 0.5 to 2 mg per kg per hour every 48 hours. A response can be seen with 10 to 14 days, and then a reduction in gradual on a daily basis over 30 to 40 days. And slowly you can do an alternate basis. The reason why I'm specific on the dosage is, even when I started my steroid therapy, I was wondering till when should we give, when should we reduce? This is a very, very common question arises in every practitioner. So that's the reason I have put in detail that for 10 to 14 days, you continue the treatment, and then you gradually reduce to 30 to 40 days, and then switch over to alternate days, and then make it to 48 hours, and then there should be no remission of the clinical signs. That's the time when we stop prednisolone. We can use methylprednisolone at 0.8 to 1.4 mg per kg, 12 to 24 hours, and that's the maintenance dose. You can either use triamcinolone or dexamethasone also. The other NSAID drugs which I told you, other than steroids, we can use Apoquil, Aclanitib, which you can import, which is highly effective. In this case of atopy, I think it would have been morely discussed. It is a very commonly used in canine atopic dermatitis, like 0.4 to 0.6 mg for 12 hours. After remission, you can use it to taper to the lowest effective dose. Yes, azothioprine, warning, should not be given in cats, given only in dogs, with 1.5 to 2.5 mg per kg is 12 to 24 hours. And same thing you can maintain as dose. Chlorambucil, maybe we can increase the frequency. Instead of giving for 24 to 48 hours, we can insert once in 3 days. Chlorambucil can be given, and dapsone is one of the latest drugs with niacinamide. They have started giving it with 1 mg per kg, with 1 mg per kg per hour, 8 hours. And then slowly after the remission occurs, we can taper to the lowest effective dose. So why do we so many drugs? When do we combine drugs? So I have a dog with pemphigus. I have done a cytology. I have got its acantholytic cells. But I started steroids. Animal is still not responding to therapy. When do you wait? Wait for 10 to 14 days, 2 weeks. no, I don't see any therapy, I don't see any no improvement in the animal. Then I switch on, I add something with steroids. Maybe I can add azothioprine, or I'll add mycophenolate mofetil or leflunomide or other drugs when I start at. So this is a dog which we've been treated with steroids, which didn't have very classical improvement. And then after, when they add azothioprine also, they had this kind of improvement. So we can use methylprednisolone sodium succinate also as pulse therapy, and maybe dexamethasone also as pulse therapy can be given. Cyclophosphamide, anti-cancer drug, mycophenolate mofetil or leflunomide. It's up to your choice which add-on you're going to take with the steroid. Treatments usually start basically at 4 phases. It's called the induction phase, it's called the transition phase, it's called the maintenance phase, and then you have the determining cure. So when it's actually induction is that you stop the inflammatory component as quick as possible and suppress the immunological response that is attacking the skin. So you have to give the inflammatory component as quickly as possible. So why we use a very higher dose of steroid. So then you go something called higher doses of medications are usually given. So when then you call us go to a phase called transition phase. So what happens that you give it for a while, there is remission has happened. So then you have tapered to minimize the adverse effect, because all the immunosuppressants are given are going to cause any adverse effects. Either they're going to go Cushing's, or they're going to cause any liver disease or any other side effects. So what you have to do, you have to minimize and give taper to minimize the adverse effects. It's slowly done over several weeks or even months. If relapse occurs, medications are, it should increase. So maybe if you're given for 6 weeks and after 6 weeks, you are happy and then remission again occurs, then you have to give the maintenance dose. That is, you have to go back to the induction dose. Maybe you start on a higher therapy of 2 mg per kg or 3 mg per kg of steroid. Then you have gradually brought it out to 0.5 mg per kg. Then by suddenly after 6 weeks as remission, you have to go back to the first dose what you have already started. Next, what is the maintenance dose? So the last dose where you have achieved here until remission is achieved, that dose is taken as maintenance. It's tapered down again to the last dose that kept the patient symptom free. How do you determine the cure for an autoimmune skin disease? So basically, when do you determine a cure? Okay, your dog is free from an autoimmune disease. A patient is considered cured once it has achieved remission, has been successfully controlled with maintenance therapy, and that does not have recurrence after treatment has been stopped. So when do you determine the cure? No, the dog doesn't more require any of these immunosuppressive agents. So when do you decide that? So what usually happens is that when you give this maintenance dose, give it for a while and you stop for maybe for 2 weeks or 6 weeks, and there is no remission of this particular skin disease, then you determine the cure. Yes, your dog is cured of this autoimmune skin disease. This induction, transition, and maintenance of the determined cure is holds good for any autoimmune disease, especially autoimmune skin diseases. Or what I want to do about relapsing or refractory cases. A small number of cases, yes, it might be a challenge that they'll be coming as a relapse to you. So they have either failed to respond or they have adverse reactions to the forms of therapy. Maybe you can switch the type of glucocorticoid therapy to obtain a response, or you add on, or you try to move away from glucocorticoid to add some other thing. You have combined different immunosuppressive agents or alternative therapy, but sometimes if they do not respond, you have to say the prognosis to the animal. If it's very bad, you have to put it to sleep. So this is what happened to one dog. I did a cytology. We found acantholytic cells. We started them on antibiotics and steroids. Only steroids. I started only on Visolon prednisolone. And this is a week 1. The animal is still under treatment. So this is what happened to one dog. What is a summary of pemphigus, of an autoimmune skin disease? Your first identification of the disease is very important. We cannot assume that this may be an autoimmune disorder. We cannot assume it might be a case of demodicosis. We have to really identify. Diagnosis is very important. The simple cytology will help us to identify pemphigus in our routine practice. Treatment, it may be pemphigus foliaceus, it may be pemphigus vulgaris. The treatment is all the same. So you either do a treatment in 4 phases. Sometimes you give supportive treatments like vitamin A and eicosapentaenoic acid and immune suppression. Yes, remission, you would have to determine when there is cure, and relapse is quite common. I thank you so much. nobody slept. And thank you so much for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Hamza, for taking us into the topic and giving us a good insight into it. We have questions coming up from people. The first question is there a relation between pemphigus and SLE?
There's only relation between pemphigus erythematous and SLE, sir. But other than that, pemphigus and SLE are two different kinds of autoimmune skin diseases. Sir.
How can we minimize immunosuppression which is being caused by steroids?
You reduce gradually.
Yeah, please go.
Shall I? Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Shall I go ahead?
Please go ahead. You can't hear me?
Yes. Yes, I can hear you, sir. So usually that is how do you bring about reduction in steroid, like the immunosuppressive therapy, right, sir? That's your question, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah,
usually so you go start with a steroid, you have a side effects, you feel that your animal is having side effects of steroid. That's the reason we have other drugs which can be added to reduce the effects of steroid. So you can reduce the dose of the steroid and add some other immunosuppressive agents also.
I think one probable solution is calcineurin inhibitors out here, which will have lower side effects. Another is, can we use some immunoboosters so that it aids in the recovery?
Sir, here our problem is that our immune system is overworking and producing other antibodies towards our own system. Yes, immune boosters might help us, but it's here our immune system is working overload. So I think it's more aiming at suppressing the immune system than boosting the immune.
The best protocol that you recommend it for coming out to the diagnosis of pemphigus?
Like protocol means, sir, how do I go about a diagnosis or treatment protocol?
How do you diagnosis?
Like very simple, sir. Take a cytology and find those acantholytic cells, like a smear. That's it. Like identify when do I suspect a dog with pemphigus, right? Is that the question? They want the question?
The question is that suppose I have a dog, I'm sure what condition is it? How should I start with a diagnosis and how should I reach onto a diagnosis?
Yeah, the first any dermatological lesion, first take a scraping, sir. Find out if it's negative, if it's positive for mite or negative. Second, you do a tape impression. Find out if there's any fungal. Third, if you can do a culture, happy. If you find any secondary bacterial infection is there or not. Then you suspect. And when I say you have this kind of a distribution of lesions, fortunately, dermatology has a particular distribution of lesion in most of the dogs. So when you find such kind of distribution of lesion, especially in the nasal planar, around the eyes and ears, then you go a cytology and then find cells. If you can do a cytology on regular basis, we will be happy. I think even I should start doing it because I can also find different kinds of cells, I would see.
Let me be frank in saying that you are hearing a tussled voice sound from our end because it is raining in Ahmedabad very heavily.
Pardon me, sir?
I said it's raining in Ahmedabad very heavily, so that's the reason that we have these sounds coming up.
Okay.
People have praised about the presentation, very informative. Then, is there a relationship between hypothyroidism and the condition that we are talking about? Does hypothyroidism also is a predisposing factor?
Sir, honestly speaking, my literature, I have not come across hypothyroid related with pemphigus, but I think Dr. Nagarajan will be in a better position, sir. Sir, do we say hypothyroid with pemphigus, sir?
No, there is no correlation. We cannot say that. But whenever you say acantholytic cells, we can also see in severe pyoderma. So that has to be ruled out. So as you said, you can take a cytology and see the neutrophils, whether it has got a degenerative neutrophils, cocci in it. And also in fungal infections, also there is chance for getting acantholytic cells. So these two has to be ruled out for identifying autoimmune disease. So we have got type of fluorescent staining by which we can do this particular hair which is affected with the pemphigus. If you take that and do the cytology, we can see the fluorescence. There is a separate fluorescent stain is available. That is recently they have identified that. That also we can do, but it will take half an hour to 45 minutes to do that procedure. So that is the easiest way than this fluorescent technique. So the mesh, chicken mesh like appearance, what you are seeing, that is the confirmatory thing. We can do in any pemphigus foliaceus or pemphigus related diseases. So here the acantholytic cells, whenever you are going to interpret, you have to interpret that differentiate the severe pyoderma and also the dermatomycosis. These two things you have to keep it in mind. That's all.
Thank you, Nagaraj sir. We go to the next question. Sulfasalazines are used in human practice. That can the same be employed for veterinary? Is there a literature about it?
Yes, sir, but sulfasalazine causes keratoconjunctivitis sicca in dogs, sulfa drugs. So when used for a long time, you have to overcome those side effects. So sulfasalazine over a long term, it is not, they say it's not recommended. It's one of the side effects. So that is not one of the welcomed protocol for treating pemphigus in dogs. Yes, there are literatures, but since there's a side effects of this KCS and crystalluria, we don't advise sulfasalazine for treating pemphigus in dogs.
What would be the CBC picture be like in case we had to diagnose?
So CBC picture, you won't, if it's foliaceous or anything, you won't find any any big differences. Maybe some inflammation like neutrophilia, some like stress leukogram or something like that. You may find an increase in lymphocytes, but other than that, you cannot find any classical hematological alterations in case of pemphigus.
What percentage of animals usually show correlation with mange? Concurrent nature of with mange and pemphigus. Any sort of mange, dermo, sarcoptic. What is the likelihood of reaching on a co-concurrent infection of pemphigus?
So they're asking how many dogs will be, how many percentage of dogs are present with concurrent infection like mite and pemphigus together?
Yes.
So I don't think so. Mite may be the side effect of overgrowth, side effect of maybe the steroid therapy which I'm giving. But mite and pemphigus together, maybe because of the steroid which we are using, irrational use of steroids. So that maybe I may be landing up with demodicosis and pemphigus together.
As you said, it may be going for demodex or fungus. Whenever you go for a higher steroid for a long time, you can expect to have this kind of fungal infection or demodex infection. So that is the side effect. It's not necessarily. Yeah.
Yeah, that was highlighted in your presentation also. Is there an age group specification?
Any autoimmune disorder ideally runs from 2 to 8 years, sir. But any age can be predisposed to this condition, sir. Any age, any sex, any breed.
The next question is also correlative. Is photodermatitis also occurring because of the autoimmune disease?
Might be, sir. Photodermatitis, yes. Maybe the animal is having antibodies and the scan, the excessive photo or exposure has caused it the maybe the triggering factor for the immune mediation to happen. Sir, I'm inaudible. I'm not audible.
Yeah. What percentage of animals do also have ear and eye lesions along with the condition?
Sir, I'm not able to get you. Right?
Thank you, Miss. does it also have an affection on the ear and eye? What percentage is correlation?
Like around the eye or the eye, the eye itself?
The eye.
I don't think so. The eye, I have not found any literature, sir. Here only the pinna and only the skin, because here is also a component of the skin. But here I've seen severe, otitis can happen, but not eye. I have not seen any literature. Sir, will give like anything that, sir?
We don't come across anything in the eye.
Right, sir. The last question.
SLE has something with eye, sir. I think lupus has something to do with the eye, but not pemphigus, I guess, sir.
The last and the final question. Number one is people have appreciated the case studies, the presentation, the photographs, so that people can learn better. So thanks to you for making the presentation more interesting. The last question is, what do you recommend more? Is it steroids systematically or topical steroids? Because we have steroids of tacrolimus also available in the market, which are sprays. Yes. So the question is topical better or systematic better for both the long term and the short term perspective?
Both, sir. Go with topical so that you reduce the topical is going to help us in reducing the higher oral systemic doses of steroids. So I would say I recommend both, sir. Sir should give us, sir. Sir, what do you recommend, sir?
Yeah, same. Okay. Whatever you are telling is correct.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am, for giving us a good insight. The last and the final question, which has come in just now. And any change in the diet that you recommend? Any dietary modulation that you recommend?
No, sir. I am not looking at a hypersensitive disorder. I am looking as an autoimmune skin disorder. So if that I have not read, they are two different disorders. So I don't think I would recommend any change of diet. But if the dog is having like a chronic skin infection, if the dog has a history of hypersensitivity to food, then I would say we can go with hypoallergenic diet. If the dog has a history of hypersensitivity reaction, cutaneous adverse food reaction, it has CAFR, then I would advise you to go with a dietary restriction. If the dog has a history of CAFR.
Is it recurrent? Does it happen for a longer period of? Does it reoccur, and does it have an effect on the heart?
Yes, it.
Once we treat it. Yeah, on a continuous.
Sir?
Yeah. Does it have a correlation with cardiology on a long-term perspective?
No, sir. Maybe the drugs which I'm giving to cause the remission treatment might have some effects over cardiac toxicity, but not the disease as such is going to cause any cardiac disorder, sir. It's primary autoimmune skin disorder, sir.
Right.
Or wherever the desmosomes are there. I don't think desmosomes are there in the heart, sir. So I don't think it will work there.
True.
And wherever a mucous membrane is there, any mucous membrane, it will damage. So yes, but not in the heart, sir, definitely.
Thank you, Dr. Hamsa, for taking us on a good journey and very precise. And within 1 hour, we have completed the entire session with the question answers. Over to Dr. Nagraj, sir, to sum it up.
Thank you, Dr. Hamsa, for your beautiful presentation. Keep it up.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Hope I did something good, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you to all.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.